And that was a really great moment for me because when she said something about food sovereignty. When she explained it, I was like, these are the words I've been looking for. This is the language I've been looking for. This is what I meant when I was standing in a kitchen saying, isn't it crazy that we can't get local produce into the restaurant?
Hey everybody, you are with Dani Valent. I am thrilled to be with you for Dirty Linen, my little podcast going from Melbourne, Australia out into the big wide world of food and interested listeners. Thanks so much for spending your time with me. If you love the show, tell your friends, give us a rating. And if you're a first-time listener, welcome. I just love growing this little community and feeding my curiosity and hopefully satisfying yours along the way. Today we are chatting to Lucy Ridge. Lucy is the author of Fed Up, A Chef's Adventures in Food, Farming and Feminism. Burnt out by life as a chef, she embarked on something of a chef's gap year, seeking out female farmers and producers to intern with and learn from all around Australia. There was cheesemaking, distilling, pig farming, salad nurturing, harvesting bush foods on country, and some grape stomping. It's been an incredible experience to read about, and I would love to learn more about how it felt to do it. Lucy, welcome to Dirty Linen.
Thanks so much for having me, Dani.
Lucy, tell us a bit about the book and how it came to be.
Yeah, well, to begin with, the book wasn't a book. It was just something I wanted to do. So at the start of 2020, I'd been really burnt out by my hospitality career. I was feeling like I wanted to do something different. And I actually thought I was going to try being a travel writer for a bit. But obviously that didn't happen because we all know what happened in 2020. So I sort of was sitting on the couch, waiting on hold, listening to that terrible Centrelink hold music, thinking, okay, so what am I going to do instead? And I knew that I still loved food. I still loved cooking. That was still a really strong passion. And so I kind of thought, what if I went and did work experience with different people in the industry? What if I went and learnt from some people? And maybe I won't want to be a chef anymore, but I might want to be a cheesemaker. I might want to be a butcher or a farmer. And so that was sort of the genesis of the idea. And I wrote in sort of very small letters at the bottom of my brainstorming page, maybe one day, maybe I could possibly write a book about it. So there was sort of a bit of a dream there, but really it was about the experiences of doing it.
Something that really struck me early on in the book is you spoke about how the chefs that you encountered, some of them at least, didn't really love food. They didn't seem connected to the seasons or ingredients in the same way that you were. They didn't seem to be fueled by creativity or a desire to learn. And, that was one of the drivers, as I understand it, for you to go off and find out where food actually comes from. Can you talk about some of the aspects of kitchen or hospitality work that burnt you out?
Yeah, you're very right. It's interesting. I think we're sort of sold this narrative that all chefs are these creative geniuses and all they think about is food. But like for a lot of people, it's just a job. They just turn up, do their time, go home. They don't really care. And you'll find people like that in any industry. But I found it really frustrating because I did care. I cared so much. Maybe I cared too much. And so I found that I wasn't working with people who were curious or who wanted to connect with their food at all. And so, and some of them did, but it was just sort of a real kind of block that I kept coming up against. I wanted to work with local farmers, but it was hard to find them. And then the bosses didn't want to have to deal with, 10 different invoices from 10 small farmers. They just wanted to pay one big invoice, end of the month, to the veg supplier. That was it. And so it became really frustrating to try and access fresh produce, local produce, seasonal produce as a chef in hospitality.
And you focused on finding female producers and farmers to work with. Why was that?
So part of it was because my very first experience in kitchens was with a female chef in a mostly all-female team, which is quite unusual still in the industry. And this was when I was 15. I was doing work experience during year 10, and I didn't really know what I was getting myself into. I was just a kid who loved to cook. And it was such a welcoming experience and such a positive experience. And I really benefited from the teaching that I received there. And it wasn't until I sort of left that job a few years later and went out into the wide world of hospitality that I realized how unusual that kitchen actually was. Even though at the time people would say, oh, you'll never work in a kitchen like this again. And, I was 15 and I said, yeah, whatever. But they were right. And so, following on from that, I worked in a lot of male-dominated kitchens and I didn't necessarily have such a positive experience. Found that, I didn't have good teachers, I didn't have good role models, and a lot of the time, some of those environments were pretty toxic. And so I sort of figured, okay, I'm done with dealing with toxic men in the workplace. I want to go out and find I call her my chef mama. I want to go out and find another chef mama who'll teach me all about what they do. So that was the thinking behind looking for women to learn from.
Yeah, great. And how did it work out? Like, tell us about some of your adventures.
Yeah, so I ended up finding 7 women to learn from, which was incredible. I definitely sent out a lot more emails and made a lot more phone calls than just 7. It's a bit of a hard sell to sort of say, hey, can I come follow you around for a bit? I'm not going to stick around and, become a valued employee. I'm just going to clear off. So I'm very grateful to the women who said yes. So I started out in 2021 at Second Mouse Cheese Co., which is a little boutique cheesemaking business in Orange in New South Wales. And so that was kind of the beginning of the adventure. And once SJ at Second Mouse had said yes, that was kind of a sign that I was like, okay, this is doable. There are people who will say yes. I just need to be persistent and find them.
I love that. And I mean, I suppose every story is so interesting and so different, and your personal stories are threaded through it. Something that really struck me is this, you sort of become this accidental food systems theorist and activist. Can you talk about some of the things that you noticed about the food system as you went along? I guess you noticed already in kitchens that, it was harder to buy from small producers and that people weren't necessarily thinking about the whole paddock to plate thing. But what are some of the other realizations that you had along the way?
Yeah, so I think part of the big realization was just the way that Australia's agriculture and food system is set up is really only geared towards big players. The goal is exports because that's where the profits are. And they're super profit orientated. So, as well as having a supermarket duopoly, we also have a small number of very large players in the agribusiness scene. Gina Reinhardt owns 3 Belgiums worth of land or something, which is wild. But if you own that much land, you're not really interested in making sure that the local, corner shop is supplied. You're thinking about how many tons of beef can I export to the US or to China? And so starting to really think about and view those systems critically, I think was a really big sort of moment of awakening for me in some ways. And so part of what really helped me to look at these systems differently was actually working with Auntie Pat Torres in Broome. So Auntie Pat's a Jugan elder and she runs a business called My Harvests, which is a bush foods business. So she wild harvests all those bush foods out on country and sells teas and spices and all these brilliant products. But being out on country with her, whenever you looked at a tree or a plant, it was never just a tree or a plant. There was always a story involved in it. And so it sort of helped to change my thinking from being very siloed. I am looking at cheesemaking. I am looking at farming. I am looking at butchering. And that's all that I am looking at in that little square. And I'm a chef and that's all I am. It was a reminder that this is not just a tree. This is also like an indicator of seasons. And it's a story about your kinship responsibilities. And it's a plant food for these animals or these birds. And so just starting to think in ecosystems rather than thinking in single industries or single silos, because when you actually stop and think about it, the reason why I was so frustrated that I couldn't get local seasonal food in the restaurant is linked to all of these other power structures and the history of agriculture in Australia. And you can't just look at one single thing. You actually have to kind of crack it open and look at it as an ecosystem.
Yeah, I really felt that as you were writing, or as I was reading what you'd been writing, that, there was this, you sort of dove down, like there are these sort of great little rabbit holes that you went down as you became fascinated by fermentation or cheesemaking or these pocket histories. But then it's also very webbed. Like you seem to be making connections as you went with all these different foodways and traditions and drawing those connections. It must have been really quite a expansive, but also, I don't know, at times overwhelming series of learning experiences, Lucy, or is that just how I would have found it?
No, totally. Yeah, they were really life-changing in their way, and each of them were different and taught me different things. I think Jonai Farms is a really good example. So it's the second internship I went on. And it's a farm run by Tammy Jonas and her family, and it's a pastured pig farm. So the pigs live out on the paddocks their whole lives. They also have their own butcher shop on site, so I was learning both farming and butchering. And actually, at the moment, they're building their own micro abattoir, which is really exciting. So it means that they can sort of keep the pigs on farm for the entire duration of their life. And Tammy's really involved in the international food sovereignty movement. And that was kind of a really great moment for me, because when she said something about food sovereignty, and I thought, food sovereignty, what's that? What are you talking about? And when she explained it, I was like, these are the words I've been looking for. This is the language I've been looking for. This is what I meant when I was standing in a kitchen saying, isn't it crazy that we can't get local produce into the restaurant? Because it's like I was looking for food sovereignty. That was the people that I needed. So that was a really great moment of just like opening my eyes and being like, oh, I get it now. So that was fabulous. So food sovereignty is a movement. It's a social and political movement, one of the biggest in the world, actually, about communities being in charge of their own food systems. So Indigenous peoples, peasants, which is not a dirty word. Peasant is, just a smallholder who lives in relationship with the land. Fisher folk and small farmers all over the world being able to decide their own food systems and to feed their communities directly and to grow food in ways that are environmentally sustainable and that are culturally appropriate, and communities also being able to participate in those decisions. So it's a food system by and for the people. And once I started sort of digging into that, that really got me excited as well.
Yeah, I love that. It's like you might drive down the road and think, well, why can't I get that cow that lives 10 minutes from my restaurant? No, I can't, because it has to be shipped there, trucked there to be killed and then shipped there to be processed and then sent overseas. And it just seems so frustratingly silly. But then you've got the language around it and the potential actions to try to, reframe those food systems. So that, must feel, quite... Yeah, the pieces falling into place must have been felt quite empowering. Lucy, one other vignette that really struck me was when you were with Jackie and you're making the really fancy salad, as she calls it. Can you talk about salad mixes and food waste and, how this expensive bag of salad actually may not be as expensive as it at first seemed?
Yeah, so when I was spending time with Jackie, she's up in Queensland, just sort of a couple of hours north of Brisbane. So she grows microgreens and also really fancy salad. And she grows it all in sort of a little room and on a space roughly the size of a tennis court. So she's a super small scale producer. And yeah, at first I was kind of shocked at the prices of her salads. It was like $14 or something. And I was like, really? You're charging that much for a bag of salad? But it turns out that bagged salads that you buy at the supermarket are one of the most wasted foods in the country. So they account for like heaps of household waste, because I think everyone's had that experience of buying a bagged salad and then it turns to like slime in the drawer in like 2 days and it's just nasty. Like the because it has to travel such a distance to you, and then it's cold stored for a while, and then they have to put it and they have to process it into the bag, and then they pump the bag full of like an inert gas or something to keep it all fresh, supposedly. So by the time it hits your fridge, it's been kicking around for a while. So it's no surprise that it's turning to slime, the minute that you open the bag. But because Jackie's salads were so fresh, and also they were so diverse. So she was including a lot of really diverse salad greens. So not just lettuces, but also mustard greens, maizunas, tatsoi, baby kale, baby chard, all of these different greens. So increasing the fiber content as well of the salad through these different veggies, and including microgreens in there, as well as edible flowers that, grow just all over the place on her property. And so by the time you actually sit down to eat a salad, it's way more filling than you think it's going to be, and it's way more nutritious than any kind of bag salad you're ever going to buy at Coles or Woolies.
Yeah, amazing. It's not going to be slime the next day. It's and I think maybe if bag salad is quite cheap at the supermarket, like maybe when you do spend a bit more on something, you also you do tend to value it more, and you'll actually remember to eat it, and perhaps you won't grab takeaway. You'll actually make your salad that you were planning to make.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think especially as well when you have a connection to the person who grew it. Like if you're buying Jackie's really fancy salad, you're buying it from Jackie. And so, if you want to front up at the Reiko ring next weekend and look her in the eye, you better have eaten your salad.
You mentioning Reiko ring makes me want to take you to another topic, which is the different ways that you learn about people purchasing food or connecting with growers. And it really struck me when you said farmers markets kind of suck, because I guess in the way that we sometimes almost, and you say this as well, almost fetishize small producers. They're like, these glorified heroes, which they should be in some ways, but at the same time, it cannot be the dream that it seems like it might be for a farmer to take their produce to an inner city market. Like, tell us about your thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think sometimes we've got kind of this cottage core idea of small scale farmers, right, which doesn't always live up to the reality. And, I love farmers markets. I love going to farmers markets. But yeah, they do kind of suck a lot of the times for the farmers, because it's a gamble every time you go. So call it radish roulette. If I pick 20 bunches of radishes and I wake up at 4 a.m. to drive to the farmer's market, set up my stall, and it's raining today, and it's a bit windy, it's not great weather, the footy's on down the road, okay, I've only sold 8 bunches of radishes. What am I going to do with the rest of them? It's really uncertain. It's really time intensive as well. If you think about all the other things you like to do on your Saturday morning or Sunday morning, like I imagine farmers would also like to go to their kids' sports or go to brunch with their mates or any number of things. But, they're standing for 5 hours at the farmer's market, or having to pay a staff member to stand for 5 hours at the farmer's market. So, sort of during this process, I saw a lot of other different methods of getting food to customers. So I mentioned Reiko rings before. That was a system that originated in Sweden, I believe. And it's a sort of acronym of responsible consumption, but I'm not going to try and butcher the pronunciation. And Jackie set it up in Queensland during COVID, actually, because it was a perfect no contact kind of affair. So essentially, customers pre-order what they'd like to buy. So usually it's a Facebook group. The producers will put up a post and say, hey, I've got bags of fancy salad today. And so the customers will say, hey, I'd like 2 bags. Hey, I'd like 1 bag. Hey, I'd like 2 bags. They pay ahead of time. And so when Jackie wakes up on a Saturday morning, she knows, okay, cool, I've sold exactly 20 bags of really fancy salad. I'm going to drive down to the empty school car park. All of the producers line up in a row and the cars pass by. And during COVID, they would just pop the boot, put the salad in, and they'd drive off again. So totally no contact. In non-COVID times, there's a little bit more time for chatting and all of that. But it meant that what might otherwise have been a really long, drawn-out affair was over in like less than an hour, because it was so quick and so direct, and you already knew what you'd sold. In some cases, it meant that Jackie would only harvest that much, because that's how much she knew she could sell. The other sort of really cool method of getting stuff to customers was through community-supported agriculture. So for those who haven't heard of that before, I guess people pay into a season usually with a farmer, and they kind of commit to the boom and bust of what's coming, and they will receive a monthly share or a weekly share, depending on what it is. If it's fresh produce, if it's meat, if it's dairy, you can have all kinds of CSAs. And so it gives farmers a reliable income, and it also means that customers know exactly where their food's coming from, and they've got that direct relationship, and they're often a really good deal too.
We can think of these things as very niche or, only for, privileged people, people with the time to think about food. But, people like Tammy Jonas do talk about that, most farmers are small farmers around the world. Most farming is done by peasants around the world. And a lot of people do still have these very direct connections with small producers. So it can sound idyllic, and I love your cottagecore description. It's great. But I guess, it can sound like airy-fairy, dreamy stuff, but it is real, and it just could be more real if people empower themselves and, live, work and grow in these ways.
If people empower themselves, and also if the government gets out of the way, there's a lot of legislation around food and farming, but it's always geared at the big players, and so they write legislation with a really top-down approach, which makes it really difficult for small-scale producers to exist, because if you're having to follow the same laws, as a farm the size of a tennis court like Jackie, as a huge horticultural business with multiple greenhouses, and big machinery, somewhere out the back of Queensland, then it's not a fair playing field, because it's a huge roadblock for a small scale producer.
Yeah, so true. And again, talking about the Jonais and their abattoir project, like the amount of hoops they've had to jump through to get that even close to being planned and built. As a small producer, there's been so many hurdles to that. Like, all power to them for persisting. Even now, think about, the conversation around fuel prices. It could be a different conversation about, the urgency of divesting from fossil fuels, and how to use the current crisis as at least partially as an opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. It's all about kind of reframing the issue.
Let's reframe a lot. Yes. Lucy, your mental health journey is a big thread through the book as well. To whatever extent you're comfortable talking about that, I'd love you to. It's mental health in hospitality is something we've touched on the podcast, a lot from time to time. But mental health in farming is also such a massive issue, not least because of some of the issues we've already talked about with how hard it can be. But tell us about the way your mental health journey was sort of intertwined with this series of internships.
Yeah, well, I think COVID was a catalyst of a lot of things for a lot of people. And I think for me, it was a real catalyst to getting to grips with my mental health. I think when I was working in kitchens, you're so busy all the time. There's no time to get any perspective. There's no time to really kind of sit and think about, like, how am I actually going? You're working these huge, long weeks, and you're just tired a lot of the time. And so it wasn't really until I was, stuck in isolation that I really started to think, oh, okay, I think maybe everything's not all right. But it still took quite a long time to really get to grips with a diagnosis and to work out what that actually was. So for me, I have bipolar 2, which is the lesser known version of bipolar. In fact, I didn't know there were two types of bipolar until I was diagnosed with the second one. But it's characterized by more depressive episodes than manic episodes. And the manic episodes are typically less manic. They call them hypomanic rather than hypermanic. And so it is quite a difficult thing to diagnose. And so for a while I was kind of riding these lows and highs of trying out new medications and then coming off them, and trying to work out, where had all my energy gone, or where had all of that drive gone. And yeah, sort of, I thought really hard about whether or not to include those details in the book, but it seemed disingenuous to skip over it simply because I was going through that journey of working out what was happening in my own brain. At the same time, I was going through that journey of learning all about the food system and doing these internships and traveling around. And so I sort of associate them all really strongly with those different times working out my mental health. And so it kind of felt like I was cutting out a big chunk of the story if I didn't talk about it. And I think it's important to talk about these things, right? It's the kind of thing that the more you talk about it, the better it is for a lot of people. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think I appreciate you having spoken about it and talking to me about it today. I mean, reflecting on your time in kitchens and knowing what you know now about your diagnosis, do you think kitchens could be better places for people who have mental health issues?
Yeah, I mean, I think kitchens, or a lot of kitchens I worked with, weren't particularly accepting of difference, or of having to make accommodations for anybody. And so, like, even I worked in a kitchen where one of the other chefs got pregnant, and so she needed some accommodations made. She didn't want to use the caustic cleaner. She, needed to sit down sometimes or have shorter shifts, and that was treated as a real inconvenience. But one of the other chefs had a footy injury. He was treated like a hero, and he could have anything he needed. And so I think, if even just looking at it from that perspective, like, oh, maybe we've got quite a long way to go until kitchens are fully accommodating of mental health issues. But I think there is more awareness in the industry now. So there have been some pretty high profile cases of suicide and other high-profile cases of chefs with mental health issues. Anthony Bourdain, of course, is the one that springs to mind, and I think that was a bit of a wake-up call for the industry in a lot of ways, but it's not necessarily well equipped to deal with it. So early on in the book, I write about going to a forum. It was like a Canberra hospitality community comes together to talk about mental health, and I really thought on my way in that they were going to have the answers. I was like, great, we're finally doing something about this issue and this is going to fix everything. But the big takeaway from the panel session was that we should try yoga. We should try yoga, and breathing exercises can be very helpful in stressful jobs. And, I just remember thinking, okay, but I just worked for 28 days in a row and I'm working split shifts next weekend and I don't have enough staff, and at what point do you think yoga is going to fix any of that? So I think we need to fix a lot of things about the industry, which will also help to deal with mental health issues. Yeah.
Yeah, like no shade on yoga and breathing, but I think there's other things that need to be done. I also love in that bit, love/hate, how, it was, you weren't given time off to attend that course. You had to pay, you had to take a hit in the pay to pack it, to go there. So it wasn't really, it wasn't really prized as a thing to go off and do. Lucy, where does chefing fit in your life now? You've got this amazing book, which I really hope everybody reads. I blurbed it and said, what did I say? It's like, if you eat, you've got to read this book, something like that, because I really think it tackles so many big and small questions, worldwide, big world issues and very personal ones, and they're all important. And I think you so nicely show how the big picture issues and the getting up in the morning and just putting one foot in front of another, they all have to work. They have to work together. I think you do such a nice job of that. So, yeah, congratulations. Where does cooking fit? Like, where does chefing fit? Yeah, like you're a writer as well now. Like, who's Lucy Ridge these days?
Yeah, well, most often I refer to myself as a recovering chef. So I'm not working in a commercial kitchen right now. I'm not working as a chef, and I love that. I love that for me right now, honestly. So yeah, I'm working part-time as a food writer, but I also work part-time for a food and farming cooperative that does a produce box scheme, so a CSA style scheme of produce boxes from multiple small producers around sort of the Canberra, Bungendore, southeast New South Wales region. And part of that is that we also supply some restaurants. And so we're aggregating produce from small-scale producers, and we're able to get local, seasonal, sustainable food into local restaurants. And so it's very cool now. Part of my job is to go in and deliver that food. And so I can go and deliver the food into the restaurants and kind of be part of the solution to the thing that really used to frustrate me when I was a chef. So that's actually really exciting.
Lucy, you changed the world. Come on.
I did it.
That's so good. You legend. I love it. All right, everybody, go out and buy Lucy Ridge's Fed Up, A Chef's Adventures in Food Farming and Feminism. Lucy, thank you so much for the chat. Congrats again on the book. And I'm going to spend more on salad mix and make sure I eat to the bottom of the bag.
That's it. Excellent. Glad to hear it. Thanks, Dani.
This is Dirty Linen. I'm Dani Valent. We bring you untold stories from the food world. Real, raw, unafraid, hopeful. We're driven by a belief that food provides endless opportunities for learning, connecting, and creating the world we want to live in. Delicious, open-hearted, meaningful. If you know a story that needs telling, get in touch. Write to dirtylinen@deepintheweeds.com.au. Thank you for listening.
This is a Deep in the Weeds production.